Good afternoon. In the following lecture is about the questions of humane endpoint in the field of animal experimentation. According to the study plan, you can become familiar with the following subunits: the definition of the humane endpoint, criteria to identify the humane endpoint, and how to formulate the endpoints depending on severity, duration, and response to appropriate therapy. We will see the additional signs in case of tumor studies and the consideration applying during aging studies, and what to do when unexpected, spontaneous, non-experimentally related conditions occur. What are the possibility to monitor death or morbidity? We will see a clinical collection about the emergency rodent health conditions. Which type of data should obligatory given in the experimental proposal and study plan if death is an endpoint? I will provide also an observational checklist as a model, and we will see the non-invasive biological parameter which can be used. So the human endpoint is the earliest scientifically justified point at which pain or distress in an experimental animal can be prevented, finished, terminated, or relieved, while meeting the scientific aims and objectives of the study. So it means that unfortunately we have some obligatory tests prescribed by the OECD when we have to wait the death of the animal. But instead of such endpoints, the human endpoints are preferable to death or morbidity and may be considered as a refinement part of the third R. During the experiment, the investigators performing studies that include pain or distress should reassess the necessity for any morbidity, moribundity, or mortality throughout the studies. Refine the endpoints whenever possible. Criteria to identify the humane endpoints include the examples in the literature, the observation of clinical signs, and the clinical signs should be enlarged, this tool, in case of tumor and aging studies. And what is the situation if spontaneous conditions occur? So the clinical observation-based endpoints generally are the body weight changes, the physical appearance, and the measurable clinical signs like the pulse, the heart rate, and the inhalation rate, and the autonomous and challenged behavior. Tumor research and toxicological studies requires a little bit more. Besides the general appearance, we have to check the state of skin and fur state of eyes, nose, mouth, and head. Is there any discharges there? The respiration, which can be sneezing, can be a dyspnea, can be a tachypnea, and normal rates. The urination and the defecation, the frequency and the quality, and the loss in body weight and body condition score, which are objective endpoints. So the endpoints, depending on severity, duration, and response to appropriate therapy, are rapid or progressive weight loss. Anorexia, it means the lack or loss of appetite or failure to drink. Debilitating diarrhea, dehydration or execosis, reduced skin turgor, edema, sizable abdominal enlargement or ascites, dermatitis or other conditions not responsive to treatment, rough hair coat, unkempt appearance, and a hunched posture or stance. And finally, lethargy or persistent recumbency and loss of righting reflex or failure to maintain body equilibrium. The endpoint, depending on severity, duration, and response to appropriate therapy in the following section, include coughing, labored breathing, nasal discharge, and gasping, jaundice, cyanosis, and or pallor and anemia, and also neurological signs like seizures or the opposite, the paralysis, paresis, circling, head tilt, blindness, or bleeding from any body orifice. You can see self-induced trauma with exposure of underlying muscle even. Any condition interfering with daily activities like eating or drinking, nest building, ambulation, elimination, or normal postural movements may be disturbed. And finally, excessive or prolonged hyper or hypothermia is also part of the signs. In case of tumor studies, we have added additional signs in neoplasma tumor studies. If the tumor burden greater than 10% of the body weight. In an adult mouse, a tumor should not exceed 20 mm in any one dimension. In an adult rat, a tumor should not exceed 40 mm in any one dimension. Tumors that ulcerate and or become necrotic and or infected, and tumors that interfere with eating or impair ambulation. So these are also endpoints, signs. What are the considerations of aging studies? The senescent animals may naturally exhibit several clinical signs that would indicate significant morbidity in younger animals. Therefore, in case of aging animals, may also experience certain benign ailments at an increased incidence. For lifespan studies, the endpoint of the study should be as objectively described as possible by the investigators. There are changes in serial measurements of temperature and body weight that correlate with imminent death, where more subjective endpoints, for example, deterioration in general health or quality of life, are used, the assessment will rely on a veterinarian's observation and judgment in consultation with the principal investigator. In evaluation of larger species like rabbit, dog, etc., could include complete blood counts, blood chemistries, urine analysis, and other minimally invasive techniques to evaluate organ functions. In case of unexpected, spontaneous, non-experimentally related conditions, we have to follow the next some steps. Conditions may arise in breeders or other so-called normal animals, or during the, for example, a spontaneous tumor, or maybe more of a general deterioration of health quality of life. Any animal found unexpectedly to be moribund, cachectic, or unable to obtain food or water must be euthanized. This is a thumb rule. So, I repeat, any animal found unexpectedly to be moribund, cachectic, or unable to obtain food or water must be euthanized. The pain or distress, the unexpected, unrelated condition should be assessed for the impact of animal welfare and experimental results. If the condition impacts experimental results, the animal should be euthanized. If it does not affect the experimental results, standard veterinary treatment must be provided. If standard veterinary treatment would affect the experimental results, the animal should be euthanized. And if the condition worsens following the treatment, the animal should be euthanized dependent on veterinary judgment and with principal investigator consultation. Death or moribundity monitoring for endpoints. While it is preferable to use the earliest endpoints compatible with the scientific requirements of each study, this is ethical, there are studies that require moribundity or mortality as an endpoint, described, for example, by the OECD. Commonly used signs of moribundity is summarized by the OECD 2000 script, that is lack of responsiveness to manual stimulation, immobility, and or inability to eat and drink. And in the following, we will compile the emergency rodent health conditions. If you observe any of these conditions, contact the veterinary staff immediately. The death has stages. We have the impending death, when moribund state or death is expected prior to the next planned time of observation. Signs in rodents include convulsions, recumbency, and tremor. And a moribund means animal is in the way of dying or agony, being in state of dying or inability to survive even if treated. And here are the illustrations. Moribundity, near death state or condition of the approaching death. It is often accompanied by poor body condition, hunched posture. I draw your attention to the hunching score in the second part, in the pain part of my lectures. And we can see a rough hair coat. The animal is observed to have minimal movement, an inability to consume food or water, and the body temperature decreases and there is a dehydration. Dyspnoe or breathlessness means a severe increased respiratory effort in which the animal gasps for air and displays open-mouthed breathing, as you can see on the illustration. The condition is secondary to fluid or mass within the chest cavity or within the abdomen, and it is often due to an underlying tumor or infection, as well as lung or heart disease. The degrees may be normal, quick, gasping, and labored. Paralysis means a complete loss of movement of limbs, most commonly observed in hind limbs. The animal is unable to move limbs, and they can completely drag behind them. The condition is neurologic in origin, with complete loss of motor function. And here you can see an illustration, for example, a spinal cord hernia, when the marrow comes out like a nuclear bomb shape. You can see this picture in a nude mouse. Labored parturition or dystocia means a failure or difficulty in delivery of pups by the female, by the dam. Pups are unable to pass normally through the vaginal canal, and therefore the mother may also appear lethargic and dehydrated. Seizures is the opposite of the paralysis, means an abnormal electrical activity of the brain that results in abnormal behavior and abnormal movements. Some animals may lie on their sides, pedaling or rhythmically contracting their limbs. The animals may extend or may contract their muscles, holding them in position. What data are obligatory in case of an experimental proposal or study plan according to the OECD if death is an endpoint? should be given the considerable alternative approaches. Why death and not moribund state is the end point? You have to give the justification. Is there any alternative approach? Why not alleviate the pain or distress? How many animals are allowed to reach the moribund state and death? You have to give a justification of the number of animals involved. Moribund animals will receive euthanasia, or they have to wait the death. And what are the expected data or parameters to collect between the moribund state and the death? Features of care and observation in these cases is a obligatory daily regular control by a competent, trained person who can recognize diseases and above described signs. The frequency of observations should be higher if special signs are present. During weekend and holidays, not only the caretaker but also the member of the experimental team and the veterinarian should participate. If signs of diseases are present in the SOP described order of notification should applied. To consider that you have to consider that the sick animal transfer is beneficial. You can transfer sick animals in an other individual cage. Written record should be kept about the frequency of observation and the statements. And here is an excellent observational checklist which was put together for the case of some rat diabetes, but you can see, you can follow, and you can of course after modification use it. And finally we will see that especially for larger animals, but today's there are equipment also for mice and rat. So the non-invasive biological parameters have to make your judgment about the endpoint. Therefore, we can use biotelemetry to follow the physiological parameters like the heart rate and so on. We can use imaging techniques, and we can collect and make the analysis of blood and urine biomarkers. It is possible to determine an experimental endpoint before the severe and painful clinical signs if you use the above described. Application of the above should be considered in case of experiments with disease, moribund state or death. And I show you the OECD guidance document on the recognition, assessment and use of clinical signs as humane endpoints for experimental animals used in safety evaluation 2000. And thank you very much for your attention.